Hey everybody, HomeSliceHenry here, and in today's video we're taking a look at level 51 ZYGARDE Complete in the Open Master League. These battles were submitted to the channel by a member of the community, Pokemonahan, so many thanks for the battle submission. ZYGARDE Complete requires months of grinding routes to get enough ZYGARDE cells, but if you want it in the Master League, it also requires a massive amount of Rare Candy XL. As you can see, he got to 199 ZYGARDE cells and only had 12 ZYGARDE Candy XL, so he had to use a massive amount of stored Rare Candy XL to power it up. So without further ado, let's hop into the matches, and let's check out ZYGARDE Complete in the Master League. Picking up a tough lead in the first match, ZYGARDE Complete into Dialga. We see a save switch into Zacian, and this Zacian is not running close combat. Running Wild Charge and Play Rough, hoping the opponent is going to get worried about a close combat and switch out, and they do. They send in Kyogre. Kyogre is going to have to deal with back-to-back Wild Charges from this Zacian. This Wild Charge will be lethal. Opponent is just going to let this go. Opponent giving up switch advantage, and my guess is they're going to send in the Dialga and go for the quad debuffed double resisted farm down. But now Dialga has to deal with Xerneas, and this is a very unfortunate matchup if you're the Dialga. Xerneas has a massive pacing advantage, and close combat would do massive super effective damage. Xerneas, now that it's debuffed, is going to be committing a shield here, and Xerneas looking to overfarm. Dialga staying in the matchup for now until they make the perfect catch, catching the close combat onto the Lugia where it's double resisted. But now in comes ZYGARDE. This is not a good matchup for ZYGARDE. ZYGARDE is only hitting for neutral with the Dragon Tails while taking super effective damage, but ZYGARDE able to land the crunch. Opponent has farmed up to the Aeroblast. Aeroblast is a massively powerful move, but ZYGARDE tanks it like it's nothing. This thing is an absolute unit of a Pokemon at level 51. Oh my goodness. ZYGARDE lands another crunch. The threat of a farm down is going to force Lugia to fire off energy, and at this point, Xerneas just wins this game. Back in comes the Dialga. Xerneas just has to get to the back-to-back close combats and does, and that will be game over for the opponent. Close combat number 1 gets the shield, and close combat number 2 is going to secure the KO onto Dialga. All that's left in the back is the 1 HP Lugia, and 2 Geomancies from the Xerneas means game over. Great lead in the next match. ZYGARDE Complete into Ho-Oh. This is an absolutely nightmare situation to be in as the Ho-Oh. Sacred Fire is going to be single resisted, and Brave Bird is going to force him to switch out. They go for the Sacred Fire. That does absolutely nothing. Oh my goodness. That is a move from a Ho-Oh. I know it's resisted, but that did no damage. Oh my goodness. This thing is disgusting. And now we're going to see the no shield from the ZYGARDE. Ho-Oh going for another Sacred Fire, hoping for a debuff. And unfortunately for them, the debuff does not happen. Crunch from ZYGARDE Complete into Ho-Oh will be no shielded. ZYGARDE gets a debuff and going for another crunch into the Ho-Oh. Ho-Oh is going to let that through. In comes Dialga. We see a pivot into Zacian, and the opponent concedes the match. We see a familiar lead in the next match, ZYGARDE into Dialga. Immediate save switch into Zacian, and like last time, the Dialga is staying in this matchup, and Dialga is going to fire off an Iron Head. Zacian is going to no shield and hope that Dialga is going to switch out. Dialga, unfortunately, staying in the matchup, so Zacian is going to have to go for the Play Rough. Opponent commits the shield, farming up energy with the Zacian. In comes Landorus, and Landorus is going to be met with the Play Rough. Play Rough connects. That does quite a lot of damage. Landorus is going to get a big farm down, but now this is going to set up a big farm down for the ZYGARDE. Opponent forced to go for Superpower here as Stone Edge would be resisted. Opponent goes for the Stone Edge anyway, and look at the damage. That does absolutely nothing. Again, this thing is an absolute beast. What the heck? It tanks the Superpower like it's nothing. In comes Dialga, farming up, trying to make it to the Earthquake, but not before Dialga makes a move. ZYGARDE commits the shield on the Iron Head. ZYGARDE going for the Earthquake here. Does the opponent respect the damage from the Earthquake? They do. In comes Xerneas in the back. It's Ho-Oh, and everything goes wrong in the end game. Ho-Oh is basically the only Pokemon in the Master League meta that can effectively wall Xerneas' energy. Anything else in the back, and this game is a win. But with Ho-Oh in the back, this is looking extremely tough. Sacred Fire will connect. Sacred Fire does get the 50% chance at an attack drop. just making it even worse for the Xerneas. Moonblast is going to connect. Xerneas farming up energy. It's getting farmed down. And at this point, ZYGARDE, the only hope is to try and call a Sacred Fire, try and farm down, but the opponent knows the win con, and they full send the Brave Bird. Moving into the next match, leading ZYGARDE complete into Mewtwo. Now the question is Mewtwo running Ice Beam? Ice Beam would of course hit for double super effective damage. Opponent farms up to 9 and then throws on alignment. Opponent goes for the Psy Strike. What the heck? That does nothing! Oh my goodness! Psy Strike from Mewtwo is an absurdly strong move, and ZYGARDE just shakes it off like it's nothing. Going for the Crunch. Crunch is going to connect onto the Mewtwo. ZYGARDE leaves this matchup with so much energy. In comes Dialga. We now see a save switch into the Zacian. Zacian farming up energy. Dialga farming up as well. Dialga not wanting to throw first, wanting to wait for Zacian to go for a potential close combat. But this Zacian is not running close combat. Opponent has so much energy on the Dialga. We see the no shield from the Zacian. Iron Head will connect. Going for the Play Rough, and we see a switch into Kyogre. Kyogre able to absorb the Play Rough and get the farm down. And now in comes the ZYGARDE. ZYGARDE going for the Crunch. Didn't quite have enough for the Earthquake. Crunch will connect, doing some solid damage. ZYGARDE making it to another Crunch. This thing has HP for days. It just simply will not get KO'd. Opponent gives up both shields, but now in a 2-0 shield situation, I mean, Xerneas just doesn't lose. Just straight up. It does not lose. Xerneas can let this go, as this cannot be an Origin Pulse. Opponent just going to go for the Surf. In comes the Dialga into the loaded energy from the Xerneas. And close combat into the Dialga, plus 1 additional Geomancy means game over. Moving to the next set, leading ZYGARDE into Dialga. Again, not a good spot to be in if you're the ZYGARDE. ZYGARDE is going to save switch into Zacian, and the opponent is going to respond with Giratina Origin. Now, this Zacian is running Quick Attack, which means the fast move is double resisted, but the good news is Play Rough will still hit for super effective damage. Zacian continuing to farm. This Shadow Ball from the Giratina is not going to be enough to KO. Zacian able to withstand that damage, make it to the Play Rough, and this Play Rough should connect, as it's unlikely the opponent is going to want to double shield here. They don't have to shield again if they want to keep switch. They leave with a massive amount of energy, but ZYGARDE is going to be able to withstand multiple Shadow Balls. Waiting the timer, in comes ZYGARDE, and ZYGARDE is just going to let this through. Shadow Ball not going to be an issue. Opponent actually running Dragon Pulse. That hits for super effective damage, but even though it's super effective, ZYGARDE's still able to tank that surprisingly well. Dragon Pulse number 2 is going to connect. In comes the Dialga. Dialga answered with the Xerneas, and in the back, the opponent does have Groudon. Now, Groudon is a negative matchup for Xerneas, but this is where Xerneas having the shield advantage is going to matter. It's again, Xerneas, even in its bad matchups, unless it's Ho-Oh, if it's up a shield, it can just flip it. Xerneas is an absolutely insanely powerful Pokemon. Opponent, do they bait? They do not. They go for the Precipice Blades, and this is going to allow Xerneas to double up on close combats. Close combat into the Groudon will secure the KO. Back in comes the Dialga, but Dialga does not have stored energy. Close combat will grab the shield, and now Xerneas is going to make it to another close combat, able to outpace the Dialga. This close combat will deal massive damage. Dialga can never farm down. They're forced to throw energy. The question is, can ZYGARDE withstand the Dragon Breath and make it to the Crunch? The answer is yes. ZYGARDE just way too bulky, making it to the Crunch, and Crunch will secure the win. Moving to the next match, and ZYGARDE sees an amazing lead as it leads once again into Ho-Oh. And Ho-Oh is staying in this matchup, which means they've got to be weak to ZYGARDE somewhere in the back. Last time the opponent did go for the Sacred Fire, and they look to stay in here. This opponent goes for the Sacred Fire as well, but this time they do not get the debuff. And oh my goodness, Ho-Oh just in an absolutely terrible situation, especially after the Crunch debuff gets applied. ZYGARDE is going to be able to tank this move. Opponent going for another Sacred Fire, fishing for the debuff, and unfortunately for the opponent, they go 0 for 2. ZYGARDE at back-to-back Crunches here. Crunch is going to secure the KO onto Ho-Oh. In comes Dialga, and as always, we see the pivot into the Zacian, and in the back, we see what they were trying to hide from the ZYGARDE. They have the Giratina Origin. Giratina Origin gets absolutely destroyed by ZYGARDE, and Zacian with this energy lead should be able to pretty cleanly win the zeros. So the opponent is put in a really uncomfortable position of, do they decide to give up a shield, or do they end up just giving up the Giratina? And that's exactly what they do. They give up the Giratina. In comes the Dialga. Zacian farming up, trying to make it to the wild charge. The game lags. No wild charge. That is very unfortunate. In comes Xerneas. Xerneas behind on energy. Xerneas going to fire off the close combat. Close combat into Dialga. It's going to hurt. Dialga will commit a shield. We see the switch into the ZYGARDE. Opponent is going to fire off energy here. Honestly, can just let this go and win the game with the Xerneas. Back in comes the Xerneas. Opponent, since they were forced to throw, they now cannot get to nearly enough charge moves to get rid of the Xerneas. And since those Dragon Tails applied, this should now be in close combat range for the Xerneas. So Xerneas is going to go for close combat number 1. Opponent recognizes that it's over, and they let the charge move go. Moving into the next match, we see a familiar lead, ZYGARDE into Mewtwo. Mewtwo staying in this matchup. Mewtwo farmed up to a potential Ice Beam. We see an immediate no shield from the ZYGARDE, and it's the Psy Strike, and that just does nothing. This thing is absolutely absurd. Honestly, I wasn't doing a great job of walking my routes before, but I should probably start walking my routes. This thing is crazy. In comes a Togekiss save switch of all things, and Togekiss is unfortunately for the opponent being shown why it is the inferior fairy type, as both Xerneas and Zacian are just dramatically better, as Zacian is going to be able to not shield once, take a shield from the Togekiss, and still win switch advantage, as that wild charge will secure the KO. Mewtwo is going to get a farm down, but bad news for the Mewtwo. Back in comes ZYGARDE. ZYGARDE still not going to shield. They go for the Shadow Ball. In the bag, it's a Dragonite, and Dragonite is going to get absolutely obliterated by Xerneas. Unfortunately, a little bit of lag there on both sides. Dragonite only able to go for the Dragon Claw, and Xerneas will be able to absolutely delete the Dragonite with the Moonblast. Back in comes the Mewtwo, and the opponent resigns the match. Great lead in the next match. ZYGARDE complete into Giratina Origin, and the Giratina is staying in this matchup, and these Dragon Tails are adding up. Opponent is going to be firing off the Shadow Ball into the ZYGARDE. ZYGARDE able to withstand that damage like it's nothing. Again, the bulk of this thing is just ridiculous. Crunch connects. We do not see a defense drop, but honestly, that's probably preferred if you're the ZYGARDE, as this way ZYGARDE is going to exit this matchup with more energy. Shadow Ball is going to connect. ZYGARDE gets the farm down. In comes Dialga. As always, we're going to see the pivot into the Zacian, and out comes Metagross, and Metagross is a bit of an awkward spot for this team to handle. Metagross doesn't do well into a lot of things that are being run in the Open Master League at the moment, but it does do well into this team. They're going to fire off the Meteor Mash. We see the no shield from the Zacian, and this is where the stored energy from ZYGARDE can come in clutch. ZYGARDE going to be firing off the Crunch. Crunch is going to connect onto the Metagross. Metagross is going to be hit with Crunch number 2, and the first Crunch did get the debuff. Crunch will be shielded. We now see a switch into the Xerneas, and it's always a bit uncomfortable to switch Xerneas into Metagross, but you need the close combat to KO. Opponent not going to let that happen. They're going to send in Dialga, and this is going to require very careful energy management to win this endgame, as one close combat does not KO. So Xerneas is going to have to try and farm up to the back-to-back here, needing one close combat for the Dialga and one for the Metagross. Xerneas farming up to the close combat, but loses the CMP tie, and that's game over. Hopping into the final match, and ZYGARDE complete leads into Dialga once again. The Zacian save switch is going to be answered with Giratina Origin, and as we've seen, despite the fact that it is running Quick Attack with Play Rough, Zacian can do surprisingly okay here. That is one thing that I do want to note, is that ZYGARDE, while it is absolutely busted in terms of stat product and has some pretty big accessibility issues, one thing that I would say somewhat helps is the fact that the top meta stuff in the Master League beat it. Like, Dialga is able to defeat it, Xerneas is also able to defeat it. I'd say those are probably the top 2. And Rayquaza as well does have some win conditions against it in certain even shielding situations. Although that one can be a bit tough just due to the fact that there's a massive difference in terms of bulk. And speaking of this battle, as we hop back in, we see a Mewtwo in the back. Again, Mewtwo has a favorable matchup against Xerneas, but Xerneas up a shield is just absolutely filthy. Xerneas is going to go for the Moonblast. Moonblast connects. That does massive damage to the Mewtwo. Mewtwo going to fire off Psy Strikes, but this has now put it into close combat range where Xerneas can potentially look to try and end this game via triple close combat. Xerneas is going to be firing off the close combat. We're going to see the no shield by the Mewtwo. In comes Dialga, and Xerneas making it to another close combat. Close combat will be shielded. Now we see a switch into ZYGARDE. ZYGARDE is going to have to burn the shield, but ZYGARDE is looking to make it to an Earthquake versus the Dialga. ZYGARDE able to hang on and withstand the Dragon Breath, making it to the Earthquake. No shields remaining for the opponent. That is big damage onto Dialga. ZYGARDE complete, gets the farm down, and that's a good game. All in all, ZYGARDE complete does look like an absolute beast in the Open Master League, and definitely a reason to be doing those routes. I believe you can get up to 3 ZYGARDE cells per day max, so it does require months of grinding, but this Pokemon is an absolute menace, whether it's in the Ultra League, which we saw in a previous video, or now powered all the way up to level 51. Although, of course, if you're going to level 51, like Monahan, you're going to need a massive amount of Rare Candy XLs, because unfortunately, at the current moment, there's not really a great way to get XL candies for this Pokemon. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. If you're enjoying the content, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't. And a special thank you, as always, to our members here on YouTube. The support guys provide is sincerely appreciated. So thank you guys oh so very much. And until next time, I've been HomeSliceHenry.